There is a story in the Old Testament that stands out not only for its intensity, but also for its ability to deeply unsettle anyone who reads it. Frankly, I consider it one of the most disturbing accounts in the entire Bible, a narrative so raw and haunting that it could easily be deemed unsuitable for younger audiences. With that in mind, I want to caution you. The content of this video is not appropriate for all ages and could potentially trigger memories of past trauma. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. The story I'm referring to is found in Judges, chapters 19 through 21. While many people may be familiar with the grim events of chapter 19, few venture further to read the continuation and conclusion of this tragic tale. Yet these chapters contain profound lessons that you and I cannot afford to overlook, even in the face of such discomfort. In this video, I will first recount the story with the gravity and drama it deserves, and then, together, we will delve into the deeper truths and warnings embedded within it. So let's begin our journey into Judges chapter 19. The story begins in Judges 19 verse 1, with a statement that sets the tone for what follows. In those days, Israel had no king. This phrase is not just a historical note. It's a lens through which we are invited to interpret the chaos and moral decay of what unfolds. In this setting, we meet a Levite, a man from the priestly tribe, living in the remote hill country of Ephraim in the north. This Levite, we are told, acquires a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah, a woman from the southern region of Israel. The word acquire here carries a transactional undertone, highlighting a relationship based on possession rather than partnership. Soon, the narrative takes a troubling turn. The concubine, for reasons not fully explained, becomes unfaithful to him. Betrayal, whether emotional or physical, fractures their fragile bond. Feeling estranged, she leaves the Levite and returns to her father's house in Bethlehem. There she stays for 4 months. During this time, we see no record of reconciliation or communication, only the image of a fractured relationship that reflects the instability and brokenness of the time. Let's delve deeper as this story continues to unravel. The story takes a pivotal turn as the Levite, determined to reclaim his wife, sets out on a journey from the northern hills of Ephraim to the southern town of Bethlehem. This act reveals a mix of persistence and obligation as he seeks to restore the fractured relationship. Upon arriving at her father's house, the reception is unexpectedly warm. Her father, seemingly eager to reconcile the two, extends hospitality to the Levite, offering food, drink, and comfort. However, this hospitality becomes a delaying tactic. Each time the Levite prepares to leave with his wife, the father intervenes, "Stay another night." Perhaps this was a gesture of goodwill, or perhaps it revealed a reluctance to part with his daughter. Regardless, the Levite agrees repeatedly, allowing the cycle to continue for several days. Day after day, the father persuades him to stay, and the Levite obliges, until finally he insists, "Thank you for your kindness, but I must return home." With his wife by his side, the Levite sets out for home, unaware that this decision marks the beginning of a chain of tragic and horrific events. As the Levite and his concubine journeyed north from Bethlehem back to Ephraim, the road brought them near the city of Jebus, later known as Jerusalem. The day was drawing to a close, and darkness was fast approaching. Concerned about traveling after sunset, the servant accompanying them suggested, "Master, why don't we stop here in Jebus and spend the night?" The Levite, however, dismissed the idea, responding, "We will not stop in a foreign city among people who are not Israelites. Let's press on to Gibeah." The servant, mindful of the fading daylight, offered another suggestion. "If we can't make it to Gibeah, let's at least try for Ramah and spend the night there." With this plan, they resumed their journey. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they finally reached Gibeah, a town in the territory of Benjamin. Yet despite arriving in an Israelite city where hospitality was a deeply rooted cultural value, they were met with indifference. No one extended the customary welcome of lodging or care. This lack of hospitality foreshadowed the grim events that were about to unfold, casting a shadow over the journey's already tense atmosphere. As the Levite and his concubine journeyed north from Bethlehem back to Ephraim, the road brought them near the city of Jebus, later known as Jerusalem. The day was drawing to a close, and darkness was fast approaching. Concerned about traveling after sunset, the servant accompanying them suggested, "Master, why don't we stop here in Jebus and spend the night?" The Levite, however, dismissed the idea, responding, "We will not stop in a foreign city among people who are not Israelites. Let's press on to Gibeah." The servant, mindful of the fading daylight, offered another suggestion. "If we can't make it to Gibeah, let's at least try for Ramah and spend the night there." With this plan, they resumed their journey. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they finally reached Gibeah, a town in the territory of Benjamin. Yet despite arriving in an Israelite city where hospitality was a deeply rooted cultural value, they were met with indifference. No one extended the customary welcome of lodging or care. This lack of hospitality foreshadowed the grim events that were about to unfold, casting a shadow over the journey's already tense atmosphere. As the night deepened and the square grew quieter, an old man passing by noticed the Levite, his concubine, and the servant still waiting without shelter. Approaching them, he asked, "Why are you still here? Hasn't anyone taken you in for the night?" The Levite replied, "No, no one has offered us a place to stay." The old man, perhaps shocked by the lack of hospitality in his town, said, "You know what? You can stay with me tonight." The Levite gratefully responded, "Thank you. Just to be clear, we don't need anything from you. We have enough food for our donkeys, for my servant, for myself, and for my concubine. All we need is a place to rest. Even a pillow would be enough." The old man, showing generosity and kindness, assured them, "It's no problem at all. You're welcome to stay in my home." With that, the Levite, his servant, and his concubine went to the man's house in Gibeah, finding a brief respite from their journey in his care. Then, the unthinkable happened. As the Levite, his concubine, and their host were settling in and enjoying a peaceful evening, a sudden disturbance shattered the tranquility. A mob of wicked men from the city of Gibeah gathered outside the old man's house. They banged on the door violently, their voices echoing in the night. They shouted to the old man, the homeowner, "Bring out the man who came to your house so we can have sex with him." This demand was shocking, vile, and an outright perversion of the laws of hospitality and morality that Israelites were meant to uphold. The men of Gibeah, Benjamites, demonstrated a depth of depravity that reflected the brokenness of their society. Their words revealed their intent. They knew a guest was inside, and they demanded the Levite be handed over to satisfy their twisted desires. What began as an act of kindness by the old man had now escalated into a nightmarish confrontation. What happens next is both horrifying and deeply disturbing. In a desperate attempt to protect his guest and uphold the sacred duty of hospitality, the old homeowner stepped outside to confront the mob. His words were both a plea and a rebuke. "Please, my brothers, do not commit this evil act. This man has come under my roof and I am responsible for his safety. Do not commit this vile atrocity." Incredibly, his solution to avoid the mob's demands was horrifying in itself. He offered them his own virgin daughter and the Levite's concubine, saying, "Abuse them and do whatever you want with them, but do not commit this outrageous thing against this man." What happens next defies comprehension. The mob ignored the old man's plea and persisted in their demands. Verse 25 delivers the chilling conclusion. But the men would not listen. Then he took his concubine and brought her out to them. They raped and abused her all night until morning. At dawn, they let her go. This horrifying act underscores the moral decay that had consumed the people of Gibeah. It also raises deeply uncomfortable questions about the decisions made by the Levite and the homeowner. The night ends in tragedy, setting the stage for events that would shake the nation of Israel. Now, my friend, you can see why I warned that this story is deeply disturbing and potentially triggering. The image painted here is one of absolute horror, a mob of depraved men taking turns raping this woman throughout the night. Finally, as the first light of morning broke, they released her. Broken and battered, this young woman somehow found the strength to crawl back to the house where the Levite, her supposed protector, was staying. Exhausted and utterly defeated, she collapsed at the threshold of the door, her hands resting on the entrance, unable to take another step. As morning came, the Levite opened the door, ready to continue his journey, only to find his concubine lying there. His reaction, shockingly devoid of compassion, was simply to say, "Get up, let's go." But there was no response. Her life had been taken by the horrors of the previous night. Realizing she was dead, he placed her lifeless body on his donkey and began the journey back home. What happens next escalates the tragedy to an unthinkable level. Upon reaching his home, the Levite took a knife, dismembered her body into 12 pieces, and sent each part to the tribes of Israel. This act, horrifying in its brutality, was meant to be a call to action, a grim declaration that something was deeply wrong in Israel, demanding justice and retribution. The reaction to this horrific act was immediate and profound. When the dismembered pieces of the Levite's concubine arrived in the various territories of Israel, the tribes were shaken to their core. The sight was unprecedented, and the message that accompanied it was clear. An unspeakable evil had occurred within their own land. The people responded with collective outrage, saying, "Nothing like this has happened or been seen since the day the Israelites came out of Egypt until now." The Levites' gruesome message left no room for misinterpretation. Accompanied by letters explaining the atrocity committed in Gibeah, it served as both a shocking indictment of the tribe of Benjamin and a desperate call to action. The tribes recognized that this was not just an isolated incident, it was a symptom of a society deeply fractured and morally adrift. What had happened in Gibeah demanded accountability, justice, and an immediate reckoning. The outrage of the people grew into a call for unity, as the tribes prepared to convene and confront the evil that had taken root among them. There is much more to this story, as detailed in Judges chapters 20 and 21. The aftermath is marked by devastating consequences that ripple throughout the nation. However, for now, let's pause to extract some lessons from this tragic account. The first and perhaps most striking lesson is the danger of living without accountability. Judges 19:1 sets the stage for the narrative. In those days when there was no king in Israel. This statement reveals a critical truth. Without leadership or accountability, people are far more likely to stray from what is right. When there is no one to enforce laws, uphold justice, or hold others responsible for their actions, society can quickly spiral into moral chaos. The Israelites, without a central authority or a leader to guide them, fell into patterns of behavior that led to atrocities they might never have imagined themselves capable of committing. This lack of accountability didn't just impact individuals, it corrupted entire communities, allowing evil to flourish unchecked. The lesson is clear. Accountability, whether in leadership, personal relationships, or our own actions, is essential for maintaining justice and righteousness. The second critical lesson we can draw from this story is the importance of recognizing every human being as a bearer of the image of God. The homeowner's suggestion to offer his own daughter and the Levite's concubine to protect the male guest is deeply troubling and reveals a disturbing mindset. In this culture, the worth of the man's life and virtue was deemed more valuable than the women's. This devaluation of women's lives highlights a systemic disregard for their dignity and worth, a failure to see them as equal bearers of God's image. This tragic aspect of the story challenges us to confront our own actions, attitudes, and biases. It calls us to reflect on whether we consciously or unconsciously dehumanize others or place differing values on lives based on gender, status, or other factors. The lesson here is urgent and clear. Every person, regardless of their circumstances, is created in God's image and deserves to be treated with dignity, respect, and care. Failing to uphold this principle leads to the kind of moral collapse and injustice that this story vividly portrays. The third lesson from this story focuses on the dangers of drifting away from God. The entire book of Judges is a testament to a recurring cycle. The Israelites slowly stray from their faith, abandoning their moral foundation only to face devastating consequences. Chapters 19 to 21 provide a grim example of what happens when a people lose their connection to God. The events described in these chapters are not isolated incidents, but rather the culmination of a gradual erosion of faith and accountability. As the Israelites moved further from God, their actions became increasingly unthinkable, leading to atrocities they never would have imagined committing. This serves as a stark warning for us today. Without a strong connection to God, we too are at risk of losing our moral compass. Slowly but surely, we can find ourselves rationalizing behaviors we once rejected, whether it be acts of infidelity, succumbing to addiction, or embracing dishonesty. The lesson is clear. Staying close to God and maintaining a relationship with Him is essential to guard against the slow drift into sin and moral chaos. The tragedy deepens in chapter 20, where the horrific events of chapter 19 ignite a devastating civil war among the tribes of Israel. The 11 tribes unite in outrage against the tribe of Benjamin, holding them accountable for the vile crime committed in Gibeah. The call for justice escalates into a brutal conflict, and the resulting war is catastrophic. Thousands of lives are lost on both sides, turning what began as a quest for justice into a national calamity. By the war's end, the tribe of Benjamin is left shattered. Only 600 Benjamite men survive the conflict, and the other tribes begin to realize the consequences of their actions. They fear that Benjamin, one of the 12 tribes of Israel, is on the verge of extinction. The problem becomes even more complex due to the absence of Benjamite women. Without wives, the survival and continuity of the tribe are in jeopardy. This conflict illustrates the far-reaching and unintended consequences of unchecked violence and a society unmoored from God's principles. Chapter 21 takes the tragedy to an even deeper level as the 11 tribes, now grappling with the near extinction of the tribe of Benjamin, take morally questionable steps to ensure its survival. They recognize that Benjamin's demise would mean the loss of one of the 12 tribes of Israel, an outcome they cannot accept. However, their solution reveals how sin perpetuates itself, creating a cycle of violence and destruction. In their desperation, the tribes devise a plan that involves more bloodshed and further sin. They target a community that had not joined the initial battle and take their women by force to provide wives for the remaining Benjamite men. Later, they orchestrate another scheme, allowing the Benjamites to abduct women during a festival to ensure the tribe's survival. These actions, driven by guilt and the desire to fix one wrong with another, only deepen the moral decay. This sequence of events serves as a sobering reminder of how quickly sin can compound upon sin, leading to devastating consequences when justice and compassion are neglected and God's guidance is ignored. The story of Judges 19 to 21 is undoubtedly one of horror and heartbreak, but it carries profound lessons that resonate far beyond its ancient context. It serves as both a warning and a call for reflection. The narrative challenges us to confront the consequences of a lack of accountability, urging us to recognize the importance of structures that uphold justice and moral integrity. It also compels us to affirm the inherent value of every human life, reminding us of the devastating consequences of dehumanization and disregard for the dignity of others. Perhaps most significantly, the story underscores the dangers of spiritual drift. It shows how, without a connection to God, individuals and entire nations can descend into chaos, allowing sin to multiply unchecked. This ancient tragedy is a stark reminder of what happens when faith, justice, and compassion are neglected. Let us take these lessons to heart, striving to anchor our lives in God's principles and to live with accountability, love, and respect for all people. By doing so, we can resist the patterns of destruction illustrated in this story and build a foundation rooted in righteousness and hope. This leads us to the fourth lesson. Every bad decision we make has consequences that we cannot control. While the actions of the Benjamites were undeniably wrong, the response of the other 11 tribes to wage war and nearly annihilate them was a choice that also carried heavy consequences. The Benjamites bore the punishment for their initial sin, but the other tribes now faced the burden of the outcomes of their own decisions. Their anger and quest for justice led to a devastating war, and the aftermath threatened the survival of one of Israel's 12 tribes. Here is a hard truth we must grasp. You can choose your sin, but you cannot choose your consequences. Sin may offer momentary satisfaction or seem justified in the heat of the moment, but it always carries repercussions, many of which lie far beyond our control. The Israelites' actions illustrate this reality starkly. One sin led to another, creating a chain reaction of destruction and regret. This lesson calls us to pause and consider the long-term effects of our choices, reminding us that every decision matters and urging us to seek God's guidance to avoid the devastating ripple effects of sin. As the story progresses, the Israelites attempt to resolve the devastating consequences of their actions, but their solution only adds to the cycle of sin and moral compromise. To provide wives for the surviving Benjamites, they launch an attack on the clan of Jabesh Gilead, killing its men and sparing only 400 virgin women. These women are then given as wives to 400 of the 600 surviving Benjamite men. While this resolves part of the issue, it leaves 200 men without wives, creating yet another problem. Here we see the compounding nature of sin. One bad decision leads to another. The Israelites had previously vowed not to give their daughters in marriage to the Benjamites, so they devised a loophole. Instead of breaking their oath outright, they allowed the remaining Benjamites to abduct women during a festival. This plan, while technically adhering to their vow, reveals the extent of their moral decay. Instead of addressing the root cause of the tragedy, they continued to make choices that perpetuated injustice and suffering, illustrating how sin, when left unchecked, can create a ripple effect of destruction. The Israelites, in their desperation to preserve the tribe of Benjamin, while adhering to their vow, devised an outrageous and morally bankrupt plan. They told the Benjamites, "During the upcoming festival, our daughters will be dancing and celebrating. Technically, we cannot give our daughters to you as wives because of our vow, but if you kidnap them, that's on you. This way, we won't break our promise." This was their attempt to sidestep their oath while still resolving the problem of the 200 remaining Benjamite men who had no wives. During the festival, the plan was carried out. As the women danced and celebrated, the 200 Benjamite men rushed in, abducting the women and taking them back to their territory as wives. This shocking and outrageous solution underscores the compounding nature of sin. One bad decision, the war against Benjamin, led to another, the massacre of Jabesh Gilead, and ultimately to this, the forced abduction of innocent women. It's a stark reminder of how a single poor choice can spiral into a cascade of decisions that affect countless lives, perpetuating suffering and injustice. Consider the devastating ripple effect of these decisions. Innocent people from Jabesh Gilead, who had no involvement in the initial conflict, were slaughtered to provide wives for the Benjamites. Women were forcibly taken from their homes and stripped of their freedom, given as wives to men they did not choose. Families were left grieving as their daughters were kidnapped during the festival. This entire cascade of chaos and suffering stems from a series of bad decisions, each compounding the previous one. While some Benjamites deserved judgment for their crimes, many others who had no role in the events at Gibeah died in the ensuing battle. The people of Jabesh Gilead, who were uninvolved in the larger conflict, paid the ultimate price as well. The abducted women, taken as a solution to a problem not of their making, lost their freedom, their families, and their futures. This tragic domino effect is a sobering illustration of how poor decisions can lead to widespread suffering, affecting countless innocent lives. It reminds us that the consequences of sin often reach far beyond what we anticipate, leaving destruction in their wake. The fifth and final lesson I want to leave with you today is this: God's grace is present even in the midst of our most destructive decisions. Despite the horrific events that unfolded, the book of Judges concludes with a note of restoration. The tribe of Benjamin, though nearly destroyed, was not completely wiped out. After taking the women as wives, the remaining Benjamites returned to their land, rebuilt their cities, and began to live in them again. Their survival and restoration were not a result of their own merit, but a testament to God's mercy and grace. The other tribes also returned to their homes, and the nation, fractured by sin and violence, began to rebuild. Though marred by tragedy, this restoration reminds us that God does not abandon His people, even in their darkest moments. His grace is greater than our failures, and He can bring hope and renewal even after immense destruction. This closing chapter in Judges offers a profound reminder. While our choices have consequences, God's mercy can pave a way forward, offering us a chance to rebuild, restore, and reconnect with Him. The final verse of the book of Judges perfectly encapsulates the entire story. In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. This single sentence reflects the chaos, moral decay, and spiritual drift that defined the era. While God showed mercy to the tribe of Benjamin and to Israel as a whole, the story stands as a profound warning. It reminds us that even when God extends His grace, the consequences of our decisions cannot be undone. These consequences often ripple far beyond ourselves, impacting others in ways we may never foresee. My friend, if you take nothing else from this story, let it be this: every decision we make matters. Our choices carry weight, and the repercussions can extend far beyond our control or imagination. This story calls us to reflect on the way we live our lives, to strive for accountability, seek God's guidance, and remember that our actions affect more than just ourselves. It's a sobering but vital reminder to live with wisdom, faith, and compassion, ensuring that our choices align with God's will and not just what seems right in our own eyes. So, as you go about your day, Take a moment to reflect on the powerful lessons from this tragic story. Recognize the vital importance of accountability, not just in others, but in your own life. Honor the sanctity of every human life, seeing others as bearers of the image of God. Be vigilant about the dangers of spiritual drift, understanding how easily we can stray without a firm foundation in faith. Remember the gravity of your decisions. Each choice we make has consequences that can ripple far beyond what we see or expect. Strive to stay rooted in God's guidance, seeking His wisdom in all you do. Thank you for watching and for taking the time to explore these challenging truths with me. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye for now, and may God bless you.